When Abraham's name is mentioned, we often think of Sarah, his primary wife, and perhaps Hagar, his Egyptian servant. Yet there is another captivating and mysterious figure in this patriarch's tale, a third woman named Keturah. Her descendants left an enduring mark on the Middle East's history, and perhaps there is even a direct bloodline connection to her, a bond that we rarely recognize in the course of history. Genesis 25:1 introduces a surprising yet simple statement. Abraham took another wife, and her name was Keturah. This brief passage reveals a lesser-known story, a key detail that deepens Abraham's narrative and sheds light on the political landscape we observe today. Keturah was not a mere supporting character in the Bible. She was chosen by God to extend Abraham's legacy. She bore 6 sons, each of whom became the progenitor of influential nations whose legacies endure today. Let's delve into this story by revisiting the time after Sarah's passing and Abraham's advanced years, when God would carry out his plan through Keturah and her descendants. Genesis 23:2 recounts the poignant moment when Sarah passed away in Kiriath Arba, Canaan. Abraham mourned and wept for her, a moment that marked not only the conclusion of a chapter in his life, but also the opening of a new chapter in God's grand design for his descendants. At 137 years old, Abraham's age may seem unlikely for embarking on new journeys, but his actions demonstrate his steadfast faith in God's promises. When he purchased the cave of Machpelah from the Hittites to bury Sarah, it symbolized not only his deep love for her, but also his unwavering trust in God's promise of a land to call their own. This was the first land to be claimed by Abraham's promised descendants, a powerful testament to faith in a future not yet visible. In Genesis 17:4, God told Abraham, "As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of many nations." Until that point, Isaac and Ishmael were Abraham's only sons. Still, God's promise had not yet come to full fruition. This context brings us to an important moment in Abraham's life, his marriage to Keturah, believed to have occurred when Abraham was around 140 years old. This reinforces that God's purposes are not bound by human expectations. Just as God allowed Sarah to conceive at 90, he continues his work through Abraham in his advanced years, using him to father 6 additional sons. These sons, destined to become patriarchs of strong nations, played a crucial role in fulfilling God's promise to Abraham. Keturah's entrance into Abraham's life and the birth of her children are not merely narrative additions, but essential elements that affirm God's control over time and his divine plan. These events underscore the idea that God's plans are never bound by human limitations. The later years of Abraham's life offer us a profound source of inspiration, revealing how God can work in the most unexpected seasons of life, using even the final chapters of one's journey to bring forth greater purpose. We first learn that age is no barrier to being used by God. Abraham, at 137 years old, continued to serve as an instrument of God's will, demonstrating that, with God, there is no limit to what can be accomplished, regardless of age. Furthermore, we learn that grief, while a natural part of life, is not the end, but rather a transition, a new beginning for the next chapter of life, allowing new opportunities to arise in unexpected ways. Thirdly, God's promises often unfold in ways that exceed our expectations. Abraham's life shows that divine plans operate in different stages, far beyond what we might anticipate in our finite understanding of time. Even with Isaac as his heir, Abraham's marriage to Keturah did not diminish the importance of Isaac or his love for Sarah. Instead, it demonstrated Abraham's unwavering commitment to fulfilling God's plan for future generations. Abraham's marriage to Keturah is a testament to his readiness to serve God's kingdom, as it opened the door for new nations to emerge, aligning with the original promise in Genesis 12:2-3. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Abraham's example teaches us that God's plans often surpass the limitations of our understanding, reminding us that even at the highest points of our lives, God's vision stretches beyond what we can see. As we explore Keturah's significance, it is essential to recognize that all of Abraham's life changes were a part of God's larger purpose, expanding the impact of Abraham's faith across generations and ensuring that his descendants would leave a lasting legacy. The name Keturah itself is a key to understanding her role within God's plan. Meaning fragrance or perfume, Keturah's name evokes associations with luxury and refinement, potentially linking her to areas known for the spice trade or signifying her role in the divine narrative. Though Keturah is simply called Abraham's wife, in Genesis 25:1, 1 Chronicles 1:32, refers to her as his concubine. This discrepancy underscores the complexity of patriarchal relationships, but does not lessen her importance within the broader context of Abraham's legacy. The birth of Keturah's children highlights the breadth of God's covenant, extending Abraham's legacy beyond Isaac's line, and shows how God's promises unfold through many generations. A fascinating Jewish tradition suggests Keturah could be Hagar, who returned to Abraham after her departure. This theory is supported by textual evidence, including the absence of Hagar's death and the symbolic meaning of Keturah's name, which may point to her transformation. This theory speaks to the themes of spiritual renewal and transformation, showing how both Abraham and Sarah underwent profound changes in response to God's calling, potentially even extending to Hagar, whose return to Abraham would signify redemption. Many modern scholars now assert that Keturah was a distinct figure from Hagar, based on several significant details in Genesis 25. The Bible clearly identifies Keturah as a new woman in Abraham's life, and her sons are different from Ishmael. The Bible is often precise in noting when characters appear under different names during different parts of the narrative. Keturah's entrance into Abraham's life marks a significant moment in God's grand plan. Through her, God intended to broaden the reach of Abraham's faith to lands and peoples that would eventually shape the course of Middle Eastern and even global history. The 6 sons she bore would become patriarchs of nations, aligning with the great civilizations of the ancient world. A closer look at the biblical records hints that Keturah may have come from the Arabian region, a theory supported by the fact that many of her descendants settled in areas from southern Palestine to Arabia. Genesis 25:6 offers an important clue. Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac, but to the sons of his concubine, Abraham gave gifts. And this verse unveils a divine wisdom in how Abraham's legacy was shared with his various lineages. Even though Keturah wasn't his primary wife like Sarah, her sons were still recipients of Abraham's gifts and guidance. This suggests that Keturah was far more than a secondary character in the story. She played a pivotal role in shaping God's plan to establish and grow new nations. The sending of her sons to distant regions underscores God's deliberate and careful distribution of Abraham's legacy, with each line having a unique historical impact. Although Keturah's story isn't included in the canonical Bible, Jewish traditions have kept many accounts of her, offering rich insights into her legacy and how she was viewed across generations. Some traditions honor Keturah as a woman who experienced a profound spiritual change, forsaking idol worship to embrace the God of Abraham, symbolizing a spiritual rebirth following Sarah's death and Isaac's marriage. This illustrates the divine orchestration as Abraham enters a new phase of life, expanding his influence while safeguarding the promise through Isaac. Keturah was instrumental in allowing the spread of Abraham's monotheistic faith beyond the boundaries of the Promised Land. While the Bible dedicates more space to the stories of Sarah and Hagar, Keturah's account is more concise. Yet, her influence is acknowledged through references to her descendants in various parts of Scripture, particularly in historical and prophetic narratives. Keturah's 6 sons, as detailed in Genesis 25, verse 2 through 4, were Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishak, and Shua. Each would become the patriarch of a distinct people, fulfilling God's promise that Abraham would be the father of many nations. These nations would later play key roles in the history of the Middle East and influence major civilizations. Though her descendants do not have the prominence of Isaac's line, Keturah's progeny left a lasting impact on history. The nations they founded were involved in significant political, trade, and cultural exchanges, forming an integral part of the region's larger historical context. The spread of Abraham's monotheistic faith and his values through Keturah helped shape new nations and communities, extending the influence of that faith beyond the Promised Land and contributing to God's divine plan. Let's delve deeper into each of Keturah's sons and their influential roles in history and culture. 1. Zimran. The first son of Keturah, Zimran's name means to be praised or to sing in Hebrew. He settled in the western Arabian region, strategically located along vital trade routes between Arabia and the Mediterranean. Scholars like Tommy have associated Zimran with the ancient city of Zimam, a key trade hub. Archaeological evidence shows that Zimran's descendants became prominent traders in the spice and fragrance industry, with an interesting connection to Keturah's name, as spices and fragrances were central to their culture. 2. Jokshan. The second son of Keturah. Jokshan's name means hunter or trapper. He was the father of Sheba and Danaan, whose descendants would have a significant impact on ancient history. Sheba chose to settle in the land now known as Yemen, a region famed for its wealth in spices and other valuable resources. The Queen of Sheba, who visited King Solomon in 1 Kings 10, may have been a descendant of this lineage. In contrast, Danaan emerged as a key trading center in northwestern Arabia, frequently mentioned in biblical prophecies such as in Ezekiel 27:20 and Ezekiel 38:13, where their people are described as leading traders. Medan, Keturah's third son, whose name means judgment or dispute, is less known in the Bible compared to his brother Midian. However, archaeological evidence suggests his influence in the northwestern Arabian region. Ancient inscriptions record a group called Maddan, believed to be descended from Medan. Known for their caravan trade, they may have later integrated with the Midianites. Midian, Keturah's fourth son, is perhaps the best known. His descendants play a prominent role throughout biblical stories. The Midianites settled in a region stretching from the Gulf of Aqaba to the Moab plains, creating a highly advanced civilization with considerable influence. One of the most important figures from Midian is Jethro, Moses' father-in-law and priest of Midian, as recorded in Exodus 3:1. The Midianites were both allies and adversaries of Israel, highlighted by Gideon's victory in Judges 6-8. Ishak, the fifth son of Keturah, whose name may mean he leaves or abandons, is believed to have settled in northern Arabia, according to some scholars. While there are few direct mentions of his descendants in the Bible, archaeological evidence points to tribes that may be connected to Ishak. Ancient texts also associate his descendants with the Yazb region, referenced in Assyrian records, suggesting they preserved a strong tribal identity. Shua, the youngest son of Keturah, is notable because one of his descendants, Bildad the Shuhite, appears in the book of Job as one of Job's 3 friends, Job 2:11. This suggests that Shua's descendants may have maintained a tradition of wisdom and intellectual debate. Assyrian texts also mention a tribe named Suru, settled along the Euphrates River, which some scholars believe may be linked to Shua's descendants, showing the expansion of Shua's lineage into the northern regions, contributing to the area's cultural diversity. The descendants of Keturah had a lasting impact on the Middle East, shaping key regions and contributing to trade, culture, and politics. Though Keturah was not Abraham's primary wife, her children left a lasting imprint on great civilizations, reflecting the divine strategy and heavenly plan to extend Abraham's legacy through the generations. The division of Abraham's inheritance is not only a critical moment in his story, but also holds profound theological significance, showcasing the wisdom and accuracy of God's plan. Abraham's choice in Genesis 25:5-6 to give all his possessions to Isaac, while gifting his concubine sons with provisions, clearly fulfills the promise of God as spoken in Genesis 17:19. Sarah, your wife, will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. The inheritance division symbolizes the continuation of the covenant. Isaac, Abraham's son by Sarah, was appointed as the main heir, inheriting not only the land of Canaan, but also the divine covenant made with the patriarchs. This inheritance was more than land. It was the precious responsibility of maintaining the messianic lineage, which would eventually bring forth the Savior and fulfill God's promise of redemption for humanity. Yet Abraham did not merely give his wealth to Sarah's children, but also made gifts to Keturah's sons, as detailed in Genesis 25:5-6. The Hebrew term matano indicates important and generous gifts, enabling Keturah's sons to build their own lives, start their own lines, and establish their own families. These gifts were not merely material, but also had spiritual and strategic value. Abraham's gifts show his wisdom. He didn't simply distribute wealth, but provided his children with the means to become self-sufficient and prosperous. This not only helped them build solid foundations, but also established alliances, especially in the context of trade. Abraham certainly passed on essential knowledge of trade routes and tribal relationships, critical elements in fostering prosperity and success in society. These gifts Abraham offered to his sons were not only material, they also embodied spiritual values such as faith, wisdom, and reverence for God, which he had acquired throughout his personal journey. Abraham's decision to direct Keturah's sons eastward during his lifetime was a shrewd and insightful strategy, revealing deep wisdom in various aspects of his life, from preserving the sanctity of the promised lineage to widening his commercial and cultural reach, ensuring familial harmony, and fulfilling God's grand design. This move was not only a strategic decision in managing his inheritance, but also a comprehensive fulfillment of God's promises to Abraham. By sending Keturah's children eastward, Abraham created opportunities for them to flourish, while also contributing to the formation of significant trade routes. The empires they established bridged vast regions from Arabia to the Mediterranean, forming a trade network that exchanged not just goods, but also ideas, culture, and religion. Descendants of Zimran, Jokshan, and Medan played a vital role in the flourishing of commercial civilizations, especially in spice trade, fragrances, and other prized commodities. Archaeological evidence affirms their long-lasting influence on the surrounding societies. The tale of Keturah, Abraham's third wife, is more than a mere genealogical note. It encapsulates the unfolding of divine promises, prophetic fulfillment, and far-reaching consequences that continue to shape the world today. From the brief mention of her children in Genesis 25, 1-4, the narrative unfolds a vivid picture that ties together history, geopolitics, and deep spiritual truths. The 6 sons of Keturah were not just ancestors of powerful peoples in the Middle East. They were the founders of vital trade routes that nurtured ancient civilizations and upheld Abrahamic faith traditions. The divine promise in Genesis 17:4, "You will be the father of many nations," found its fulfillment in Keturah's lineage. These families not only expanded Abraham's influence, but also set the stage for enduring cultural, commercial, and political ties. The territories once settled by Keturah's descendants were not just vital historical hubs in the Middle East. They continue to serve as key geopolitical areas in today's world. The trade routes they develop still exert a substantial influence over global trade, especially in oil and natural gas. On a spiritual level, Keturah's story acts as a profound reminder of God's faithfulness in fulfilling His promises across generations. Isaiah 46:1 says, "I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and my purpose will stand, and I will do all my pleasure." The story of Keturah invites us to recognize how God's hand is at work through the unfolding of history, fulfilling His eternal purposes through different nations, and demonstrating His enduring love and faithfulness to all descendants of Abraham, no matter their circumstances. The implications of this story stretch beyond the realm of historical and political events. It serves as a lesson in patience and trust in God's plan. By examining the lives of Keturah's descendants, we can see how even the smallest events contribute to the fulfillment of God's great purposes. Keturah's story continues to remind us that the decisions we make today, regardless of how insignificant they may seem, are part of a greater and eternal plan orchestrated by God from the beginning of time. We thank you for watching and joining us as we dive into the profound story of Keturah, Abraham's third wife. If this video resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on more videos. Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know what you learned from the story. Let us thank God for His wisdom and love, and remember that He is at work in our lives, even when we may not see His hand. Thank you, and may you always live in peace through God's grace.